subsidy for an acre of polyhouse to be erected. The advantages are one can grow the crops continuously, and a farmer can grow high value vegetables, ornamentals, and even sometimes fruits. So, as a result, what happens is, in the polyhouses, normally drip irrigation is taken up, which provides a very congenial status of moisture content to the worms. So, availability of the plant roots for them to feed, and then the moisture content creates a sort of a heavenly situation, and they have a very short life cycle, anywhere between 30 to 40 days depending on the temperature. They can complete in a given cropping season 3 to 4 life cycles. So, this has become one of the major problems, and there are certain instances. This is one example near Bangalore. This is a polyhouse where zarberas were grown. This farmer, he has 5 acres of polyhouse, and he had to replace the top 6-inch soil, because right now we do not have very efficient nematicides. Similarly, another emerging problem is in case of orchards, that is particularly in case of pomegranate and guava, and the root cause for their spread comes from Andhra Pradesh, because they have one of the biggest nurseries in the country, and they do not check the soil for the nematode incidence, and they are distributing nematode infected seedlings, particularly guava, various other plants. So, we have a program called All India Coordinated Research Program on nematodes, and many visits were made, and the nursery growers were tried to educate, but the effect is yet to be seen. Okay. Now, what makes nematodes so successful? If any one of you remember seeing a nematode under a microscope, you can see all plant parasitic nematodes, they have a syringe like structure called a stylet. So, this stylet, it injects various enzymes and other molecules into the plant cytosol, which also helps in softening the cell wall enzymatically as well as mechanically. Then they can go inside. Most economically important nematodes are the endoparasites. So, here if you see the role of these secretions, they can modify the plant cell walls, they can also suppress the host defenses, they can also regulate the plant hormones, remodel the signal transduction pathways and transcription factors, and also mimic the plant molecules. So, there are different types of endoparasites. We have semi-endoparasites like Rhotilenculus, then we have Heteroderas and Melanogain, which are sedentary endoparasites, and Tylenculus is also a semi-endoparasite. So, these endoparasitic nematodes, they cannot feed from normal host cells. The normal host cells have to be modified into specialized cells. So, they are given different names. In case of root knot, they are called Dan cells. In case of cyst nematodes, that is Heteroderas and Globigerras, they are called Syncytia. Here in this case, there is a single cell, here there will be several cells. Now, what are the options for nematode management? We have various options like starting from cultural, physical, where you can use heat or hot water treatment, works well in certain cases like banana burrowing nematode Rhadophilus. This is quite effective. Host resistance, then biological control, which is growing at a pace of around 5% globally, then integrated nematode management, then we have chemical. So, as long as we had chemicals, this was the best, but now most of the chemicals, a lot of fumigants were used for nematode management. So, now most of them have been withdrawn, though 1 or 2 molecules are there, but they are still at infancy, I should say. So, as a result, we have a lot of scope for using these modern tools using the molecular means for which genomics is highly useful. So, we can use the approach of RNA interference using the genomics data to design crops resistant to nematodes. So, these are some of the disadvantages, as you all know. I think many people might have told you. Now, what is the options using genomics? So, once you have the genome information, it will be available for comparative genomics, so that you can understand what are the different types of genes that are present in a given organism or a given nematode. Though there is a very high level of conserved nature of genes, but still every nematode is different because of some unique genes present. So, this identification of genes helps us to understand what are the vital genes which can be potential targets for designing the transgenics and also for designing molecules targeting these vital functions. Like if we take nematodes, it will be hatching, host finding mechanisms, infection, development and reproduction. So, all these issues are similar to insects. You have similar activities like hatching, host finding, infection, development and reproduction. Now, who brought about, who are responsible for making the application of genomics so very useful for eukaryotic genetics as well as applications, particularly in case of medicine and agriculture? Can any one of you identify these people? Who is this? This is Sidney Brenner. So, Sidney Brenner was working on C. elegans, and he got Nobel Prize for genetic regulation of organ development and programmed cell death. So, I do not have to tell about these two guys. If you see the number of insect genome sequencing projects, it is about that are registered in NCBI. There are about 1200 registered projects at different stages, for which 401 genomes have been assembled and annotation has been done for about 155. Probably there are many which are still not registered, like one of ours is also not registered here. We are sequencing one of the pigeon pea pod borers, that is the spotted pod borer, Maruca vitrata, and probably another 6 months or so we will complete it. So, this is as reported in 2019. Then this is a snapshot of a few completed genome sequences of important nematodes globally. I always say in most of my presentations that this particular nematode, Caenorhabditis elegans, is the mother of everything, all nematodes, whether it is human parasite, animal parasite or plant parasite, because of the advantages of C. elegans. I hope you all are familiar with that, I will not go into it. So, that provides not only for the parasite genomics, but for the discovery of or drug designing. This is hugely beneficial. If you see any drug designed or discovered, I do not think anybody can do away without C. elegans. So, that is the strength of C. elegans. And coming to some of the plant parasitic nematodes, we have, this was the first, Millardigan hapla was the first plant parasitic nematode to be sequenced, and followed by that incognita. Now, many people have resequenced and improvements are there. Then Millardigan floridensis, Globidera pallida, Heterodera avini and Graminicola. Sorry, this is completed and I have not removed that. So, now what is RNAi? You all know about it because you have almost come to the end of the training program. It is a post-transcriptional gene silencing, otherwise popularly called PTGS. It is a conserved biological response to double-stranded RNA that mediates resistance to both endogenous parasitic and exogenous pathogenic nucleic acids and regulates the expression of protein coding genes or gene expression. Now, this is the mechanism of RNAi. You have the double stranded RNA. This is with respect to the exogenous. When you introduce it into a system, the dicer breaks this or chops the double stranded RNA into small interfering RNAs, which make a complex with the RNA interfering silencing complex, which guides this to the respective messenger RNA where it gets hybridized, like the double stranded RNA molecules get separated and it gets hybridized with the respective messengers and brings about the degradation, thus the genes are missing. So, this is in gist. Now, coming to the worms, how do we deliver this double stranded RNA into the worms? Because we are targeting the worm genes. So, there are two approaches. One is under in vitro conditions, we can go for microinjection. Secondly, feeding with E. coli, that is expressing the target gene, or thirdly, soaking the worms in dsRNA with or without neurostimulant. So, we use a couple of neurostimulants, I will be telling you in later slides. And then coming to the agriculture purpose, we go for continuous supply of double stranded RNA, we have to use implanter delivery system. So, microinjection and feeding through E. coli is mostly used in case of C. elegans, because that is a bacterial feeder, therefore, it makes their life very easy, whereas microinjection is very difficult in case of plant parasitic nematodes, and moreover due to their obligate nature they cannot be cultured. Do not move your leg, okay. They cannot be cultured, and since they have to be multiplied on plants, this is not possible to feed on the bacteria expressing the dsRNA. Now, these are a few examples. There are many more. Now, if you see, compared to insects, nematodes are far easier to work with. This I realized when I started working with the insects. So, some of the examples where major sperm proteins, cysteine proteinases, C-type lectins and all, they are used in, if you see the list of nematodes, they are mostly the endoparasites, like either Heterodira or Globidira or like Melanogain incognita. We have, this is Heterodira shaktii is a nematode which infects sugar beet, which is a major problem in most of the European countries. And then Globidira pallida is a potato cyst nematode. And now, earlier it was believed that confined to the southern hills, but now it spread to Himachal. And then these are a few examples I have given for host delivered RNAi. These examples, they show, except for soybean, mostly they are either in tobacco or Arabidopsis. Now, coming to what is that we are doing. We started our work way back in 2008, and if because you are students, particularly in case of insects, you have to be very cautious. If any one of you, like those who are already in third year, definitely won't be taking it up, but if you pursue your career in this area, you have to be very sure that the functional RNA pathway is present in the target insect which you are working, because it cannot be taken for granted that every insect, because insect diversity is very huge. So, not necessarily every insect has a functional RNA pathway. Therefore, before you start, there are quite a few papers where people have tried to understand this aspect, and it is highly variable. But at least you have to see whether some of the key genes are, you may not be able to get all the genes. If you see C. elegans, see there are 77, maybe there are a few more, but then at least the maximum number of the RNA effector proteins known is in C. elegans. But if you take insects, you may not get all of them. Therefore, it is extremely crucial that you identify whether the functional pathway is present or not. Otherwise, you will be wondering why I am not getting any phenotype. So, even for confirmation, you have to use that. So, this is across different nematodes, the number of effective effectors bringing about RNAi present. In case of Incognita 27, this was this particular paper was based on in silico analysis, that is using the sequence information that is available and doing the identification, comparison, everything under not wet lab conditions. This is just under bioinformatics procedures. So, then we have confirmed the presence of all these 27. In fact, we have got a couple of new effectors and we have published that. Now, how are you, the most important question is, how are you going to select the genes, whether it is editing part or it is silencing part. So, in case of pests and diseases, this holds good even for insects. So, in case of nematodes, if you see the life cycle, it starts from the egg. So, the J2 which comes out of the egg is the infective stage. Therefore, the J2 in case of particularly root knots and cyst nematodes. So, this J2 it will be in the soil, and when it comes across the roots it infects, and then further development takes place. It establishes, makes the feeding cells, and then also develops into J3, J4 and females. So, you can see the symptoms at maturity, again the reproduction takes place and you find these egg masses. So, there are, though there are so many stages, but if you glance at this life cycle, there are 4 critical stages. So, hatching, you can either stop the hatching, obviously there will not be any worms. Infection process, if they are unable to go inside, they will die because without food they cannot survive. Feeding also, even if they go inside, maybe they will feed for a little while, after that they can't feed, you can interfere at that stage. If you know about the R gene mediated resistance, so this is what is interfered, because there is hypersensitivity around the feeding cells and the feeding cells die, then the nematode also dies. So, lastly reproduction. The advantage, one may question, oh, it has completed its feeding, why should we bother about whether it reproduces or does not reproduce? Yes, it is very important. I told you right in the beginning that nematodes, if you want to see the damage, it is a number game. So, if you stop the reproduction, this will be helpful for stopping the population build up, and the succeeding crop will be very healthy. Now, based on these things, these are the few gene targets we selected. One is, since the esophageal gland secretions are extremely important both during the pre-parasitic as well as the post-parasitic stages, we took about 7 genes. There was a profiling done for these esophageal glands. They had selectively removed the glands and made a cDNA library and profiled the genes which were expressed specifically in these esophageal glands. So, out of that we took 7 of them, and second group of genes were these FMRF amide-like peptides. They are neuropeptides. They are useful for sensing the nematode environment. You can see how it is probing the plant surface. You should always remember it is an animal. So, it has a very well developed neurosensory system. It is really amazing. So, this is the strategy we utilized. We selected the genes, cloned those genes, confirmed by sequencing, and initially we did in vitro RNA evaluation of the target genes by soaking the worms in double-stranded RNA. This is in vitro transcription. This is just to show if the dsRNA is taken up. We have used here FITC as a fluorescent marker in the solution. You can also label the double-stranded RNA. So, when that double-stranded RNA is taken up into the worm body, it fluoresces. Then we have I should say very elegant in vitro techniques to understand what is the effect of silencing a particular gene on the nematode life cycle or nematode biology. So, there is one method. Nobody can say there is a gel in this Petri plate. There is a gel called pluronic Okay, when it sits, it is completely transparent just like glass. So you can monitor the nematode movement towards the plant roots, and also this is another one, again a soilless system. They are called CYG growth pouches. CYG is the name of the manufacturer. There is only one manufacturer globally in US who makes these pouches. They can be used in the entire crop protection as well as agronomy, highly useful. So you can see the plants kept, we have to just support these pouches, that is some kind of a brown paper which is highly absorbent, supported inside a polythene bag, and we support those pouches between two thermocol sheets. Then you grow it in this soilless system for 30 days so that the nematode can complete its life cycle, and we score the various parameters like number of galls, egg masses, eggs, and see what is the effect of gene silencing. Once we get some clue, see in vitro gene silencing is supposed to be transient, because in case of nematodes, the RNAi does not become, plant parasitic nematodes, it does not become systemic. So you have to continuously supply the double stranded RNA. So as a result, we may get, it depends on the gene function. So depending on the gene function, whatever effect which lasts for say 3 or 4 days, the effect can go up to 30 days. So that is the strength of the gene. Then once we get some clue as to the effectiveness of the silencing under in vitro conditions, we go for making the plant constructs. So we make the hairpin constructs. I think you know what is a hairpin construct. Then we do transformation. Initially we worked, we used tobacco because we wanted to get our hands set and generated the transgenics. Later on, our target crop at that time was brinjal. So we did transformation in brinjal. Once you have the transgenics, they need to be confirmed by various molecular analysis like PCR. In PCR also you have to use different combinations of primers. You have to confirm whether the whole construct is there or not from right to left border, for which you need to have the marker, since these are not marker free. So we confirmed with the marker gene, then both the orientations you need to have for successful dsRNA generation, both the sense and the antisense have to be expressed. Here this is the intron. So when it gets linearized, it folds back and the intron gets spliced off, and you get the double stranded RNA which gets processed by the dicer into siRNAs. So all that need to be confirmed by PCR. Then we do qPCR, though qPCR is not exactly essential, but still gives you some idea about the expression levels, and then the southern blot hybridization for copy number determination. So this is how we are growing the transgenic plants under controlled conditions. So each of the fruit from a plant is harvested, then they are labeled, seeds are collected, like that we have for these many genes, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, about 7 or 8 genes. Okay, you can well imagine the amount of work that would have gone into this. This is one case study. I have just given you an outline what we have, what need to be done for each of the gene. So if you take 2 of the neuropeptides, that is FLP14 and FLP18, initially we did the expression analysis. This is also very important to understand the selected target gene role, whether it is specific to one particular stage or across the different stages it is expressing. So this holds good. I think you can correlate it with insects. Just like nematodes, you have so many stages starting from egg, L1, L2, L3, L4, and in some L5, and then pupa you have an additional stage which we do not have, and then the adults. So here this particular gene was females, all the genes were compared, the expression levels were compared to the egg stage, that was taken as the base level, and you can see in females it is highly down regulated as compared to even egg. Similarly, both the neuropeptides, I will tell you later on why. So then when we did the in vitro RNA of FLP14 and 18 in the J2s, you can see these are the controls where the worms were soaked only in water or buffer, and then you take an unrelated gene, something like green fluorescent protein, and compare it to that, there is down regulation. We were also asked to show whether there is any reciprocal effect, meaning when we silenced 14, whether there was any effect on 18. There was no effect. Similarly, when 14 was silenced, there was, sorry, this is 14 and this is 18. When 18 was silenced, no effect on 14, meaning no reciprocal effect and specificity of gene silencing. So, molecular analysis, this is the southern blot where we have the single copy, then multiple copies. This is in case of 14 and this is in case of 18. We selected only single copy and a few double copy events, and then did qPCR to understand the expression levels of the transgene. Then this is a northern blot. So, this is with double stranded RNA, and this is with siRNAs. You can see 22 to 24 nucleotides. That shows that there is a successful generation of siRNAs, because the plant will process the double stranded RNA that is expressed in the plant. Next, this is how the roots are scored. We have taken each and every root and then counted all the parameters. This is how it has affected the various parameters like galls, egg masses, females and eggs per egg mass. Ultimately, based on these factors, we derive the multiplication factor. So, how many times compared to multiplication factor is final population by initial population. So, compared to the controls, you can see how the multiplication factor has come down. So, this gives us a clue that there will be reduction in the population buildup, and suppose continuously we grow for 4 or 5 years, the population levels will come down below the threshold level. So, we are successful. We do not have to remove the last nematode. Now, the last piece of evidence to show that our RNAi has worked is by doing the expression analysis in the worms dissected out of the roots. So, this is for control, then FLP14 and reciprocal FLP18. This is in case of different events of FLP14 and FLP18. We did the expression analysis. We have the transgenic generations up to T3, T4, and there was stable expression, and performance was also stable across different generations. Many times what happens is in some crops like bhindi, I have got to know from different people and also companies, the construct falls off. For some reason you do not know, the construct falls off and there will not be, you come to T3, T2 generations, you do not have the full construct. Therefore, it will not be successful. So, stability is also very important, which is done normally at T3, T4 or T5 generations. In addition to that, how do you know, like we have been hearing about lot of transgenic BT brinjal reported from Haryana. So, if we want to know whose event it is, normally when you give out a transgenic event, you have to characterize the site where it has got integrated into the genome. So, we have done that, and even this is called event characterization for a particular event called 8.1. So, we found the backbone as well as the flanking sequences. You can find here different PGMT vector backbone and flanking sequences. The black ones are the flanking sequences. When we did the blast of these sequences, it showed 100% similarity to Solanum melanogaena contig this. So, based on this, we have designed primers to these flanking regions, and when you do PCR, it will amplify only in that event and will not amplify in other events. So, this is how you can claim the event ownership, just like how people claim hybrid ownership based on a fingerprint, you can claim event ownership. Similar to that, this is another a case study where we targeted two esophageal gland genes, MSP18 and MSP20. So, we also evolved from the first. When it came to this, we did the profiling across all the stages, starting from eggs, pre-parasitic J2s, early parasitic J2s, late parasitic J3s, J2s, and then J3, J4s, young females and mature females. So you can see the expression differences. So this is in accordance with the requirement of these genes functionally. If you, I think I wouldn't like to go into details, you can read because those references are there. Then when we did in vitro RNAi, this again interfered with its penetration ability. You can see freshly hatched, which were not treated, water controlled, then GFP treated, these are silenced. Huge reduction in the number of worms that have gone in. So this is on long-term effect in terms of its reproduction and multiplication factor. So these were again taken for plant delivery system. These are the southern blots. All the single copy were taken, qPCR, and then the northern analysis. This is for phenotyping. What is the effect of transgenics expressing the double-stranded RNA on its growth and development? This is one thing we were very intrigued. The host delivered RNAi should basically come into effect when once the worm starts feeding, because until it starts feeding, where is the delivery happening? Because it was believed that the worms, when it is in the process of entering, it is not taking anything of host origin. But most of our transgenics, because we were working mostly with neuropeptides and these esophageal gland genes, we found a huge reduction, somewhere between 30 to 50% reduction in the invasiveness of the worm. So we were very surprised, what is causing this reduction? So we almost took 3 years to crack this particular issue. Ultimately, what we did was, we labeled the plants with C14. Very young plants, you know, just about 5 or 6 day old seedlings, we labeled with C14, then we set up infection on those. After that, within 8 hours, the worm, when you infect behind the roots, it takes about 6 to 8 hours to start going inside. See, it has to first overcome the cell wall barrier, okay. So in the process of that, it's very simple. You imagine a syringe going into the body, and when we withdraw that, there is no liquid coming up because the plunger is not withdrawn. The whole syringe is just pulled out. But in case of worms, that's not happening. When it injects the secretions, when it withdraws, it also sucks back some plant sap. This is what we wanted to prove. So when you label the plants with C14, it gets metabolized because it is carbon, it gets incorporated. And when the worm is trying to penetrate the plant, it is taking up the plant sap which is containing C14. So we collected those worms and we quantified the C14 in those worms. Then we could confidently say that because of when it is taking the plant sap, it is also getting the siRNAs. That is how, even at that stage, the worms were repelled. They could not make successful infection even though they try hard. So this was really a very interesting study where we could prove how RNAi could be effective for stopping the nematode infection. So here again I tell you, when the plants are young, they are very, very susceptible, they don't have the tolerance, they die. But if it's a big plant, there is an exception for this because now guava and pomegranate are different, but otherwise they don't get affected so much. Therefore, we have to really protect the plants at the young stage. This is again the tDNA integration we have done for MSP 18. So based on this work, particularly the neuropeptides, just recently in the month of April, finally a US patent, a process patent. You know, genes cannot be patented in India. We had first filed an Indian patent for this, and subsequently a PCT, that is called a patent cooperative treaty, which gives you a way for filing your patent in different countries. So there are about 168 signatory countries under PCT. Then we chose US as our first jurisdiction, and we got this patent. So this is now another example. That's where we were targeting only the worms. We have a hyperparasitic bacterium called Pasturia penetrans, which is supposed to be something like a bacillus. This is again just like how nematodes are obligate parasites on plants, Pasturia penetrans is an obligate parasite on worms. It can't be cultured. That makes all the work relating to Pasturia and nematode very, very difficult. Okay. So this was taken up by my PhD student. We wanted to understand what kind of genes are involved during this interaction between Incognita and Pasturia. Then we also wanted to, because you should remember, you have to, whenever you are working on a particular gene, you have to understand its site of expression. Site of expression gives you lot of clues as to what is its function. So we did the site of expression analysis through in situ hybridization, then the functional validation again using our most liked in vitro RNAi. So this is one example. What he did was, for this he did a transcriptome analysis. He set up the Pasturia encumbrance, like you can see one small bacterium sitting on this. So if you put the worms in a suspension of bacteria, they go and get attached onto the nematode cuticle. Okay. So we gave 8 hours exposure. It gets attached within half an hour, but if you have to see any changes at transcriptional level, you have to give certain time. So we took 8 hours time and we did a comparative transcriptome profiling of Pasturia encumbered J2s and healthy J2s. So we got quite a few differentially expressed genes, out of which, see, whenever you are publishing a transcriptome paper, any genomics approach, if your biological questions are not well defined, nobody is going to publish your paper, because you are not doing any work here. You are at the most collecting some tissue and grinding it, giving it to a company to sequence. So what is the utility of that? So unless you show a utility, maybe 5 years back you just have a transcriptome, you could publish it, but now it's impossible to publish a transcriptome alone. And that too, you need to have proper replications, and subsequent to that, how you do the validation. These are all various questions. How well you interpret that data. Okay. So here we did the entire, you have heard several talks, data interpretation, assembly, everything, and ultimately for a final publication, we did the validation with 5 genes, whether they really have any role in interaction between the bacteria and the nematode. One example is RNA mediated silencing of the 5 transcript caused altered endospore adhesion on nematode cuticle, all the 5 of them. So you can see these 5 nematodes silenced, and these are, here is the explanation for this. So it reduced. So the major findings are evidence of early transcriptional response by the nematode after addition of Pasturia endospores, then downregulation of gene response was exhibited by the susceptible nematode host, which is probably caused by subversion of host immunity by the parasite. Then Pasturia endospore adherence to the nematode cuticle induced a downregulated protein response in the nematode, leading to defense suppression and increased longevity of the host, and there were several differentially expressed transcripts putatively This is all again the interpretation of the data. Similarly, he took one more gene called fatty acid and retinol binding protein, selenium binding protein and mucin like protein. He did the RNA for all these 3 genes, and each one of them is an independent paper. You can see spore concentration was used for doing the adherence, the difference, how the number of spores varied between the 2 treatments, reduced number of spore filled females when we silenced the gene, size of the worms were also different when we silenced the gene compared to the controls. This is the developmental expression, this is reduced reproduction potential with respect to all the parameters scored. Then FAR1 had a negative impact also on host finding ability of the J2s. You can see the first one is MI, second is I think silenced MI, PP, then again silenced PP. So there is a huge reduction in the worms near the host roots. So full length was cloned. This is again for the first time and characterized. Expression in all developmental stages indicates its importance throughout the nematode life cycle, and also it is we did the in situs, which shows that it is expressed in the hypodermal region that may help them to quickly utilize the fatty acids and retinols from the host tissue. They have increased attachment of the spores upon when we knock down FAR1. This also suggests that the protein is involved in the formation of a protective coat on the surface of the cuticle, and then the FAR protein incognita has effect on host finding, growth, development and reproduction of the nematode. This is one of the most exciting application of RNAi. The host finding of worms is totally a black box. How it moves towards the host as well as recognizes the host is a black box. In C. elegans, there is a huge amount of information, but due to the obligate nature of plant parasitic nematodes, it has been hugely, I should say, difficult for us to understand. So fortunately, we had a way because of our work with the neuropeptides. We identified 4 genes called ODR1, ODR3, TAX2 and TAX4. So these ODRs, they are odorant proteins. There are quite a few odorant proteins, I think almost up to 8, ODR1 to 8. But at that moment, because I have not given all that information here, you can read this paper recently published. So there is a pathway which involves these 4 genes in case of C. elegans. So we try to identify, these were not even annotated. Remember, this genome of M. incognita was published in 2008, but half the genes are still not annotated. So we took the sequences from C. elegans and we did the blast at protein level. We identified, we selected the region based on 30% similarity at protein level, and we could amplify all those genes from incognita. Then when we did the knockout and see what is its effect, relative expression levels, I think this is in different stages, okay. Then knockout effects, you can see this is again we have developed a combinatorial medium to study the behavior. So this is GFP and this is control ones, and in this case ODR1 silenced, ODR3 silenced. You can see the randomness, these tracks that shows that they are lost, whereas when they are not silenced, they are more towards directional movement. This is the effect of silencing these 4 genes when they were silenced towards the tomato root tips. All these experiments are done on pluronic gel and a combination of pluronic with agarose. So it hugely interfered with its movement and infection. how do you prove that it is important in host recognition? What we did was, we collected the root exudates of different plants like tomato, tobacco, eggplant, maize, wheat, this is mustard and marigold. In this maize, wheat, mustard and marigold, they, you know, they are very poor hosts. Some of them are very poor hosts and some of them are even antagonistic crops. So you can see the behavior of the worms towards different root exudates. So this again gave us an indication that yes, it is playing a big role. So this is the way we have done a combination of agarose and pluronic gel. This hugely, I tell you, it is so taxing. The student must have done hundreds of experiments to understand this as well as this. So he designed this combination of using pluronic gel and agarose here and pluronic here. So when you keep the worms at a distance, the worms will move because we have kept the plant here, they move and they get stuck at the junction. So you go home, come back after 24 hours, they can't move away, you collect those worms and do all downstream analysis. So based on your requirement, you have to design your methodologies. That's where comes the innovativeness. Now coming to the last part, where since this is an insect training program, I have taken up a small responsibility of gene silencing in pigeon pea spotted borer, that is Maruca vitrata. We had to really struggle. We have, Dr. Subramaniam has been quite helpful to us. So when we silenced some of these midgut genes, see, none of them, the function is not known. So we are trying to understand the function here. So it caused death. So we have also tried to do the host delivered RNAi. It is very difficult. We are working with pigeon pea. These are the genes which we have taken. I have deliberately not given the gene names because these things are still not published. And some of the genes nobody has ever tried. We have these many events, 16, 15, 8, 13, 12 events, and we have done the PCR confirmation, southern hybridization. Of course, still the copy number is not done and the bioefficacy needs to be done. We will be doing that in this season. So RNA based crop protection, you have in case of insects, different dsRNA delivery approaches are there. I think this will hold good for nematodes also. You have the implanter transgenic approach for host delivered, but due to the issues of GMOs, people are resorting to different ways like foliar sprays. For all these purposes, you have to first stabilize your double-stranded RNA by various means, and also you need to have a means to synthesize huge quantities of double-stranded RNA. For that, you have to go for bacterial based. There is a company I have heard in Korea, I think, they can give you for any given gene the double-stranded RNA. A kilogram of double-stranded RNA costs you 45 lakhs. So it's a good business prospects for you people. You can set up, you don't have to look for jobs, okay. So then people are also trying soil dredges, root delivery systems, stem injections, baits and traps. Then application in case of insects specifically. So dsRNA pesticides have the potential to be species limited. Delivery methods depends again on the target pest. More bioinformatic databases are required. More bioassays are bioassay data is also required. Some insects are highly susceptible and some are not. So the reason being is you have to understand whether there is functional pathway or not. Then more understanding of cellular mechanisms will aid in the development of second generation dsRNA pesticides, which may include nanoparticles and other microcarriers, nuclease inhibitor formulations and modified dsRNAs. Now, these are again some of the challenges of RNAi effects. You need a robust expression of the dsRNA in the plants, but what is the baseline again is a big question mark. Then expressed dsRNA should not have homology with the sequences in the plant. This is the most. So you have a database for siRNAs. You can choose the given sequence or the selected sequence against the database and see how many homologies you get or what is the uniqueness of your target gene. Then simultaneous silencing of more than one gene. This is in gene editing, people have demonstrated you can silence about 25 genes. Okay. So here again it is possible to go for more than one functional gene. Then root expression in case of nematodes, particularly the plant parasitic endoparasites. So we can confine our expression to the root alone so that your foliar part is safeguarded and edible part does not have that. Then level of expression of dsRNA required for effective RNAi is again very variable. Then inability to generate the mutants due to obligate nature of parasitism makes it highly difficult to work with, and lack of information on genetic control of critical functions. See how many genes are involved. Is it a single gene control? Like you know how complicated it is if it is a quantitative trait loci for breeding. So here again I say, see we have now worked with almost how many nematodes? Incognita, Graminicola which goes on to rice, Heterodira aveni which goes on to wheat, then Maruca and few other nematodes, entomopathogenic nematodes. So it is so very difficult. We must be having not less than 200 genes in our lab, additional genes to see what is the unintended effects, what is the interactive effects among the genes. Therefore, the profiling I told you, the esophageal gland profiling gave them 37 genes. So if 37 genes are required for the infection process and if you are targeting one gene, how do you expect it to give 100% control? You never get RNA gene silencing giving you 100% control. Maybe in insects there is a possibility, but host delivered RNA probably is difficult. There is one case where they have achieved 100% control using RNA is for this bean mosaic virus. In case of Brazil, that is commercialized. I think some 3-4 years back that is commercialized, and that is the only case where 100% you get effect. Okay. Now I should acknowledge, lastly, without the funding from the council, IRI and also the different funding agencies, it would not have been possible to do this work, and all the students have worked very hard. Thank you. Okay. So any queries? It is a standard protocol in the sense you can do it by normally two different ways. So one is using Trisol, another one is using various kits. Homogenizing, we homogenize in the small microcentrifuge tubes. We have designed you know the glass pestles, and we grind it within the tubes, and we use see the worms have a very tough cuticle. So you need some kind of friction to be created for efficient grinding. So we use sterile sea sand, a few grains of sea sand, okay, very fine. So that helps you in grain. Any inert material you can use, a few grains. If you use too many of that, worms will get stuck in between and they won't come under your pestle. Therefore, that makes it very difficult to grind. Whether it is DNA or RNA, it holds good, particularly from J2s. Females is very easy.